"Don't sign that," the maid whispered in Russian. The millionaire froze instantly. "Welcome back to our channel. Today we bring you an incredible story that will leave you breathless until the very last word. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our amazing stories. And please, tell us in the comments where you're listening from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Whether you're in New York, São Paulo, London, or anywhere else, let us know. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's dive into this extraordinary tale of secrets, betrayal, and unexpected heroism. Chapter 1. The Golden Cage. The Manhattan penthouse gleamed under the afternoon sun, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Central Park. Richard Blackwood adjusted his Armani tie as he paced across the marble floor, his Italian leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the polished surface. At 52, he was the epitome of success. Steel gray hair, perfectly styled, sharp blue eyes that had negotiated billion-dollar deals, and a presence that commanded respect in every boardroom from Wall Street to Tokyo. "Sir, your 3 o'clock appointment has arrived," announced his assistant through the intercom, her voice crisp and professional. Richard paused at his mahogany desk, glancing at the stack of contracts that would seal the biggest deal of his career. The acquisition of Meridian Technologies would cement his position as one of the most powerful tech moguls in America. Everything he had worked for over the past 20 years was about to pay off. "Send them in," he replied, straightening his shoulders. As the heavy oak doors opened, 3 men in expensive suits entered the room. Their leader, Viktor Petrov, was a tall, imposing figure with sharp Slavic features and eyes that seemed to calculate every move. Behind him walked 2 younger men, their faces stern and professional. "Mr. Blackwood," Victor extended his hand with a practiced smile. "It's a pleasure to finally meet in person." Richard shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Petrov, I trust your flight from Moscow was comfortable." "Indeed, Russian winters make New York feel tropical," Victor chuckled, though his eyes remained cold. "I believe we have much to discuss." As they settled into the plush leather chairs around the conference table, Richard noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Anya Volkov, his housekeeper, was quietly arranging fresh flowers in the adjacent room. She had worked for him for 3 years, a quiet woman in her early 30s who spoke limited English but performed her duties with meticulous care. Her blonde hair was always pulled back in a neat bun, and she moved through the penthouse like a ghost, almost invisible. "The contracts are ready for your review," Richard said, sliding the documents across the table. "As we discussed, the merger will create unprecedented opportunities in the Eastern European market." Victor's eyes gleamed as he flipped through the pages. "Yes, your technology combined with our resources will be most profitable." Richard felt a surge of excitement. This deal would net him over $2 billion and establish his company as a global powerhouse. He reached for his Mont Blanc pen, the same one he had used to sign every major deal since starting his company. "Shall we make this official?" Richard asked, his pen hovering over the signature line. It was then that he heard it, a soft whisper in Russian from behind him. Anya had moved closer, ostensibly to dust a nearby shelf, but her words made his blood run cold. "Ne podpisivai eto," she whispered urgently. "Don't sign that." Richard's hand froze mid-air. His knowledge of Russian was limited to basic phrases he had learned during business trips to Moscow, but he understood enough to know what she had said. More importantly, he had never heard Anya speak Russian in his presence before. She had always insisted she was from Ukraine and spoke only Ukrainian and broken English. Victor's smile faltered for just a moment. "Is everything all right, Mr. Blackwood?" Richard's mind raced. Why would Anya warn him? And why in Russian? His instincts, honed by years of high-stakes negotiations, told him something was terribly wrong. I just need a moment to review one final detail," Richard said, setting down his pen. "Please, help yourselves to refreshments." As Victor and his associates moved toward the bar, Richard caught Anya's eye. She was still dusting, but her movements had become more deliberate, more urgent. When their eyes met, she gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the door. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the penthouse as Richard realized that his perfect deal might be the biggest mistake of his life. But who was Anya Volkov, really? And what did she know about Viktor Petrov that he didn't? Chapter 2. Whispers in the Dark. That evening, Richard sat in his study, the unsigned contract spread before him like a puzzle he couldn't solve. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 times, its deep resonance echoing through the silent penthouse. Victor and his associates had left hours ago, clearly displeased by the delay, but Richard had insisted on reviewing the terms overnight. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Anya entered, carrying a tray with his usual evening tea, Earl Grey with a splash of brandy. But tonight, her demeanor was different. Gone was the submissive posture he had grown accustomed to. She moved with purpose, her green eyes alert and intelligent. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her English suddenly clearer, with only a slight accent. "We need to talk." Richard set down his reading glasses, studying her face. "Your English has improved remarkably since this afternoon." "I speak 5 languages fluently," she replied, placing the tray on his desk. "Russian, Ukrainian, English, German, and French. I've been observing." "Observing what exactly?" Anya glanced toward the windows, then moved to close the heavy curtains. "Viktor Petrov is not who he claims to be. That merger contract isn't about technology transfer. It's about money laundering on a massive scale." Richard's chest tightened. "Or what are you talking about?" "I worked for the FSB, Russian intelligence, for 7 years before I came to America," Anya said, her voice steady but urgent. "I specialized in financial crimes and international money laundering schemes. Viktor Petrov is wanted by Interpol for funding terrorist organizations through shell companies." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. He had built his empire on legitimate business, never cutting corners, never dealing with questionable partners. The thought that he might have unknowingly been about to enable criminal activity made his stomach turn. "Why should I believe you?" he asked. Though his instincts told him she was telling the truth, Anya reached into her apron and pulled out a small device, a sophisticated listening device no bigger than a button. "Because I've been recording everything. Victor's conversations, his phone calls, his meetings with his associates. He's been using your penthouse for 3 days to coordinate operations." Richard's face went pale. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting you," she corrected. 3 years ago, I was assigned to monitor your activities as part of a larger investigation into Russian oligarchs operating in New York. But you were clean, completely legitimate. When I reported this, my superiors wanted me to find ways to compromise you anyway." The room fell silent, except for the steady ticking of the grandfather clock. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, but inside the penthouse, Richard felt as if his entire world was crumbling. "I refused," Anya continued. "I had seen too much corruption, too many innocent people destroyed by my government's ambitions. So I defected, but I stayed close to you because I knew they would eventually try to use you." Richard stood and walked to the fireplace, staring into the dying flames. "And now they have." "Victor isn't just laundering money," Anya said, moving closer. "He's planning to use your technology to create untraceable digital currency transactions. The blockchain patents in that merger agreement would give him the ability to move billions of dollars without detection." "My God," Richard whispered. "The humanitarian applications we discussed, the aid programs in developing countries. Front organizations. Every dollar sent to those programs would be siphoned off to fund operations across 3 continents. Richard turned to face her, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not the quiet housekeeper he had barely noticed, but a woman who had risked everything to warn him. "What do we do?" "We gather evidence," Anya said. "I have recordings, but we need more. Victor is coming back tomorrow morning to finalize the deal. He's growing suspicious of the delay." "Can we contact the FBI?" "Not yet. Victor has connections everywhere. Law enforcement, government, even some of your business associates. We need irrefutable proof before we make any moves." Richard felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him, 20 years of building his empire, and now he was being asked to risk everything to stop a criminal he had unknowingly invited into his home. "There's something else," Anya said quietly. "Victor knows I'm not who I claim to be. He's been testing me, speaking Russian when he thinks you're not listening. I think he suspects I'm FSB. Then you're in danger." "We both are," she replied, "but we're the only ones who can stop him." As the fire crackled in the hearth and the city hummed with life beyond the windows, Richard Blackwood realized that the most important decision of his life wouldn't be made in a boardroom, but in the shadows of his own home, with a woman whose real name he didn't even know. Chapter 3. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. The next morning brought a typical New York drizzle, the kind that made the city's glass towers look like they were weeping. Richard had barely slept, his mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. By 7 a.m. he was dressed in his sharpest suit, navy blue brioni with a silver tie, preparing for what might be the most dangerous performance of his life. Anya had been up even earlier, preparing the penthouse for Victor's arrival, while secretly positioning recording equipment and ensuring escape routes remained clear. She moved with the precision of someone trained in espionage, every action calculated and purposeful. "Remember," she said as she arranged breakfast on the dining table, "act normal. Sign the contract if necessary, but try to stall for time." "I need to access Victor's phone to download his encrypted communications," Richard nodded, adjusting his cufflinks nervously. "How do you plan to do that?" "Leave that to me," she replied, then added more softly, "Richard, if something goes wrong, there's the emergency contact in my room, Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. She's the only person in law enforcement I trust completely." Before he could respond, the elevator chimed, announcing Victor's arrival. Anya immediately shifted back into her role as the quiet housekeeper, her posture changing, her expression becoming neutral and deferential. Victor entered with his usual confidence, but Richard noticed something different in his bearing, a subtle tension like a predator that had caught an unfamiliar scent. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Victor said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I trust you had time to review our agreement." "Indeed," Richard replied, gesturing toward the dining area. "Shall we discuss the final details over breakfast?" As they settled at the table, Victor's gaze followed Anya as she served coffee. "Your housekeeper is quite efficient," he commented in English, then added something in rapid Russian that made Richard's blood run cold. Anya's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as she set down Victor's cup, but she showed no other sign of understanding. However, Richard had caught enough of the Russian to know Victor had said something about surveillance and problems that need to be eliminated. "Yes, Anya is very dedicated," Richard said carefully. "She takes pride in her work." Victor's eyes remained fixed on Anya for a moment longer before he turned his attention to the contracts. "I'm afraid there have been some complications since yesterday. My associates in Moscow are concerned about the delay." "What kind of complications?" "The kind that require immediate resolution," Victor said, his voice hardening. "I need your signature today, Mr. Blackwood. My investors are not patient people." Richard felt sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool morning air. "Of course, I just had a few questions about the subsidiary structures." As Richard stalled with technical questions, Anya moved around the room with practiced invisibility, but Richard could see her positioning herself closer to Victor's briefcase, which sat on a side table near the window. Victor's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen with obvious irritation. "Excuse me, I need to take this," he answered in Russian, his voice sharp and commanding. It was then that Richard saw Anya make her move. With movements so fluid they seemed choreographed, she approached Victor's briefcase under the pretense of cleaning the table. Her fingers worked with incredible precision, and Richard realized she was somehow accessing Victor's phone through the briefcase's contents. But Victor was more observant than they had hoped. He ended his call abruptly and turned around, his eyes immediately finding Anya near his belongings. "Что ты делаешь?" he snapped in Russian. "What are you doing?" Anya looked up with practiced confusion. "I am sorry, sir. I clean only." Victor's expression darkened. He spoke rapidly in Russian, his voice filled with suspicion and anger. Richard watched in horror as Victor's hand moved toward his jacket, toward what was clearly a concealed weapon. "Actually," Victor said, switching back to English, his voice deadly calm, "I think we all need to have a very different conversation." In that moment, Richard realized that their careful plan had fallen apart. Victor knew exactly who Anya was, and now they were both in mortal danger. The morning light filtering through the windows seemed to dim as Victor's true nature finally revealed itself. "You see, Mr. Blackwood," Victor continued, his hand still near his weapon. "I've known about your housekeeper's true identity for quite some time. Anya Volkov, former FSB agent, current defector, and now... problem." Richard's heart hammered against his ribs as he realized that the hunter had become the hunted. But as he looked at Anya, he saw something in her eyes that gave him hope. She wasn't finished fighting yet. The breakfast table, so elegantly set just minutes before, now felt like a battlefield where the next few moments would determine whether they lived or died. Chapter 4. The Price of Truth. The silence in the penthouse stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Victor's hand remained poised near his weapon, while Anya stood frozen by the briefcase, her cover completely blown. Richard's mind raced, searching for any way to diffuse the situation. "Victor," Richard said slowly, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Victor laughed, a cold sound that seemed to echo off the marble walls. "The only misunderstanding, Mr. Blackwood, is that you thought you could deceive me. Did you really believe I wouldn't recognize one of Russia's most wanted defectors?" Anya's posture shifted subtly, and Richard recognized the change. She was preparing to fight. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Since the moment I walked into this building," Victor replied. "Anya Volkov, specialist in financial crimes, responsible for exposing the Bratva money laundering operation in Berlin. You cost my organization over $300 million. Richard felt the pieces clicking into place. "You're not just a businessman. You're part of the Russian mafia." "I am many things, Mr. Blackwood, but today I am the man who will clean up a very expensive problem." Victor's hand moved toward his jacket, but Anya was faster. In one fluid motion, she grabbed the heavy crystal vase from the side table and hurled it at Victor. As he ducked, she launched herself across the room, her training taking over. But Victor was prepared. He rolled away and came up with a Glock 19 in his hand. "Enough!" he shouted. "Both of you, on the floor, now!" Richard's legs felt like lead as he slowly lowered himself to the marble floor. Anya remained standing, her eyes calculating distances and angles. "You cannot kill us here," she said calmly. "Too many witnesses, building security, cameras, your business associates who know you're here." Victor smiled coldly. "You underestimate my resources. By the time your bodies are found, I'll be back in Moscow. And Mr. Blackwood will have tragically signed his company over to my shell corporations before suffering a terrible accident." "The FBI is already watching you," Anya said, bluffing desperately. "They know about the money laundering, the terrorist funding, everything." "If that were true, this building would be surrounded by now," Victor replied. "No, I think you've been working alone, trying to play hero. How noble, how stupid." Richard's mind raced. There had to be something, some way to turn the tables. Then he remembered the panic button installed beneath his desk, connected directly to his private security firm. If he could reach it. "Victor," Richard said, slowly beginning to stand, "perhaps we can reach an accommodation. You want my company? Fine. But killing us creates unnecessary complications." "Stay down," Victor snapped, swinging the gun toward Richard. But Richard continued rising, his hands spread in submission. "Think about it logically. Dead bodies bring investigations. Investigations bring attention. Attention brings scrutiny you don't want." "He's right," Anya said, taking a small step closer to Victor. "Kill us, and you'll have half the FBI and CIA looking into your operations. But if we simply disappear, people will assume we fled together." "A wealthy man and his mysterious housekeeper." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You're stalling." "We're being practical," Richard replied, edging closer to his desk. "I sign the contracts, transfer the assets, and we disappear. Everyone wins." "Except you'll be dead," Victor said bluntly. "But you'll be rich and untraceable," Anya countered. "Isn't that what matters?" Richard could see the calculation in Victor's eyes. The man was ruthless, but not stupid. He was weighing risks and benefits, trying to decide the cleanest way to eliminate them. It was then that Richard heard something that made his heart soar, the distant sound of sirens approaching. Anya must have triggered some kind of signal before Victor had exposed her. Victor heard it too, his expression darkening. "What did you do?" "Insurance," Anya said simply. I told you I wasn't working alone. The sirens were getting closer, and Richard could see panic creeping into Victor's eyes. A cornered animal was the most dangerous kind. "You stupid woman," Victor snarled, raising his weapon. "You've killed us all." But as he prepared to fire, Richard made his move. Years of squash and tennis had kept him in good shape, and desperation gave him speed. He lunged forward, tackling Victor around the waist just as the gun discharged. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the penthouse like thunder. Richard felt a burning sensation along his ribs, but ignored it, wrestling with Victor for control of the weapon. Anya joined the fight, her training making her a formidable opponent, despite Victor's size advantage. The sirens were now directly below the building, and Richard could hear the elevator ascending. Victor, realizing his situation was hopeless, made a desperate decision. He broke free from their grip and ran toward the windows. "If I can't have your technology," he snarled, "no one can." With shocking speed, he pulled out a small device, a detonator. Richard's blood turned to ice as he realized Victor had planted explosives somewhere in the building. "The servers," Anya gasped, understanding immediately. "He's going to destroy all your data." Victor's finger moved toward the detonator button, but Anya was already moving. In a display of courage that would be forever burned into Richard's memory, she threw herself at Victor, just as he pressed the button. The explosion, when it came, shook the entire building, but it came from the server room 30 floors below, not from the penthouse. Anya had saved not just their lives, but the lives of everyone in the building. As FBI agents poured into the penthouse, Richard looked at Anya, who was struggling to her feet after her collision with Victor. She had risked everything to protect him, and now he understood that sometimes the most important partnerships weren't formed in boardrooms, but in moments of crisis that revealed the true character of those around us. Chapter 5. The Dawn of Truth. 6 months later, Richard stood in the same penthouse, but everything had changed. The floor-to-ceiling windows still offered their stunning view of Central Park, but now he truly saw the beauty beyond the glass. The morning sun cast golden rays across the restored marble floors, and the apartment felt like a home rather than a showcase. Anya emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee, her movements no longer those of a subservient housekeeper, but of an equal partner. She wore a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes, and her hair fell loosely around her shoulders. The transformation was remarkable, from hidden spy to trusted friend to something much more meaningful. "Tercidis, the FBI called," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Victor's trial begins next week. They expect a conviction on all charges." Richard nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of investigations, testimonies, and revelations. Victor's network had been vast, spanning 3 continents and involving dozens of shell companies. The evidence Anya had gathered, along with her courage in the final confrontation, had helped bring down one of the most sophisticated money laundering operations in modern history. "What about you?" he asked. "Any word from the State Department about your citizenship application?" Anya's face brightened. "Approved. Agent Chen says I should receive my papers next week. After everything we've been through, I think I've earned my place here." Richard smiled, remembering how Agent Sarah Chen had burst into his penthouse that morning 6 months ago, leading a team of FBI agents. Anya's emergency signal had worked perfectly, though the timing had been closer than anyone would have preferred. "I still can't believe you managed to download Victor's entire encrypted database in those few seconds," Richard said, shaking his head in admiration. "'Tar years of training," Anya replied modestly. "Though I must admit I was more nervous than I've ever been in my life." "Because of Victor?" "Because of you," she said quietly. "I had grown to care about you, Richard, not just as an assignment or as someone to protect, but as a person. The thought of seeing you hurt." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Richard understood. Over the past 6 months, as they had worked together through the legal proceedings and the rebuilding of his company, their relationship had evolved far beyond employer and employee. "I have something for you," Richard said, reaching into his desk drawer. He pulled out a small velvet box and set it on the table between them. Anya's eyes widened. "Richard, what is this?" "Open it." Inside was a key made of platinum, exquisitely crafted, and obviously expensive. Anya looked at it with confusion. "It's the key to the penthouse," Richard explained. "I had it made specially. I want you to stay, Anya, not as my housekeeper, not as my protector, but as my partner. In business, in life, in everything." Tears formed in Anya's eyes. "Are you sure? My past, my history with the FSB?" "Your past is what saved my life," Richard interrupted. "Your courage, your intelligence, or your integrity. These are the things that matter to me now. I've spent 20 years building an empire, but I've been living in a golden cage. You showed me what real freedom looks like." Anya picked up the key, its weight solid and reassuring in her palm. "I never expected to find a home here. I thought I was just hiding, surviving." "We both were," Richard said. "But now we have a chance to really live." They were interrupted by the sound of the elevator. Richard's assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Blackwood, the reporters are here for the interview about the new foundation." Richard and Anya exchanged glances. The Blackwood Foundation for Financial Transparency had been Richard's idea, a way to use his resources and Anya's expertise to combat money laundering and financial crimes around the world. It was their partnership made manifest, combining his business acumen with her investigative skills. "Ready?" Richard asked, standing and extending his hand. Anya took his hand, the platinum key catching the morning light. "Ready." As they walked toward the elevator together, Richard reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A whispered warning in Russian had saved not just his fortune, but his soul. It had shown him that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or acquisitions, but in the relationships we build and the courage we show when it matters most. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Outside, New York City hummed with its endless energy, but inside the penthouse, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances were writing a new chapter of their lives. The golden cage had become a sanctuary, and the maid who had whispered in Russian had become the woman who had taught a millionaire what it truly meant to be rich. As the elevator descended toward the lobby and the waiting reporters, Richard squeezed Anya's hand. Some stories, he realized, don't end with contracts signed or deals closed. The best ones end with two people choosing to trust each other with their futures, no matter how uncertain those futures might be. The doors opened onto a new beginning. The end. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments what you thought about Richard and Anya's story. Don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our global audience. Until next time, keep believing in the power of truth and courage.